Hello everybody, my name is Paul McKeever, and this is my new guitar build. Alright, so these Sperzels come packaged in a cardboard sort of mold, if you will. It just opens up like that. And on one side, you get the instructions, which can then be torn off quite easily. You want to be careful doing this because the middle part, this part here, you'll see there's a dotted line here too, is a guide that you're going to need to line up what are post holes on the back of the headstock. So try carefully to remove that. Okay. So if you can see this right here, this dotted line, we can break off that guide, and we're going to be using it to line up our guide holes. I'll show you what I mean by that. So these are a staggered set of tuners, which means that the heights of the posts are different. There's two that are tallest, two that are a little bit less tall, and then two that are the shortest. And effectively, the purpose of staggering the posts like that is because of the angle over the nut. And you see on a Stratocaster, the headstock is parallel to the neck. And that means if you've got right here a tuning peg, the angle as compared to the nut is fairly steep, not too different from maybe a, like, let's say a Les Paul, which is a Gibson product. But if you extend that angle or extend that distance, the angle becomes much less dramatic. And so what Sperzel has done for these two is they've created the shortest posts, these two the medium posts, and these two the tallest posts. And the result of that will be strings that more or less have the same angle, despite being, in this case, further away than the ones up here. Now, before going too far, I just want to make sure that we have holes that are drilled the appropriate diameter for this particular product. I certainly specified when I ordered this product, those are the holes I needed for the Sperzel heads. And it does look like they're going to work. It's just that, as you can see, there's a pin here. Maybe I'll put it up against something more white and you'll be able to see it better. There's a pin. And the purpose of the pin is so that when the tuning peg is in there, it won't spin this way. Okay, so once it's in, that peg will be into the wood and will prevent this from spinning this way in the headstock. So to make sure that that peg roots itself properly in the back of the headstock, we have to actually drill holes for each peg. For each of the 6 machine heads, a peg hole needs to be drilled 3/16 of an inch deep. Interestingly, if you're reading the instructions on the Sperzel box, you'll see that it talks about having to drill holes with a number 36 or a 2.7 millimeter diameter drill bit, and to drill it down 3/16 of an inch, 3/16 deep. So in Canada, at least at the Canadian Tire and at the Rona, where I was looking, they don't have any drill bits that are of the numbered type, number 36, number 35, etc. What they do have are drill bits specified in terms of fractions of an inch. Okay, so 7/64 is about 0.109, I think, of an inch, whereas in number 36 is, I believe, 0.106 of an inch. So this bit at 7/64 is going to make a hole that's a smidge, like 3/1000ths of an inch, 3/1000ths of an inch wider or bigger diameter than a number 36 drill bit would go. Now I'm going to use a ruler to make sure that when this guide is on here, I don't have it too far a kilter. I'm not sure how well this will work, but we'll give it a shot. Looks about right. Okay, I've made a fairly good groove there, a fairly good notch. And I'm just going to do the same thing for all 6 holes. All right, so now you might not be able to see this on the camera, but I'm just going to lay a ruler along here. See if these dots all fall in the same line. Now that's interesting. So this one here, I think I've messed up on. I'm going to redo that. Measure twice, cut once, as they say. Now you'll notice this guide can't be perfect because when I line this ruler up here as a stopper, the paper stops a little bit too far over. You can actually see some of the hole. So when you're doing this, the paper's not actually going to have to run to the edge. You're going to have to make sure that the hole lines up, right? So that the paper doesn't go too close to this edge. Now that's going to be a tricky proposition. So you can see right there, that's about the distance away. I'm just going to double check all these holes again. That one's fine. I think what we're coming up against here is the curve of the neck, or curve of the headstock. Sort of throwing things off. Because there I'm getting a different, I do it that way, I'm getting a different result. I want that one right there. Okay, now we know. Now we start drilling. All right, so update. I've been working with this Paduke neck now for about half an hour to an hour. And I've tried a number of different ways of guiding the drill bit, the 7/64 drill bit, into the right spot. Now, it turns out that if you want your tuning pegs to be perfectly aligned with the edge of the headstock, a 0.5 millimeter, just the slightest change in the position, so just the slightest bit of movement from what is ideal, has a fairly dramatic effect on the turning of the peg. So I'm going to show you as an example. One sec. Okay, so what we're looking at here is not a fully drilled guide. That's where the peg would go for the Sperzel system. This is fully drilled right here. So you'll see I can put one of these machine heads in where I've completed the route. And now it's nice and straight. It's like nice and level with the edge of the headstock. And now it turns out that after trying a number of different ways of making sure that these are all in one perfect line, I've discovered that a lot of the main methods that people would use when they're working with wood don't really work on something that's this small a scale. Just a small amount of movement, like half of that, a third of that width, can make a dramatic difference in whether this machine head here turns like this or turns like that. So it turns out that, at least with Padauk, it's a soft enough wood, it's almost like the softness of a matchstick, okay? If you first use your guide as a rough approximation of where you should be, and you can see that that paper probably is not wide enough. It needs to go right to the edge, at least for this guitar neck. It's not doing the trick, so we have to line up the hole differently. We have to line up the paper with the hole rather than with the edge of the guitar, okay? So once you've done that and you've marked it with a pin, just a tack or even the end of a screwdriver, you can then take your drill bit, here's the 7/8 inch drill bit, and place it in the little divot and literally turn it by hand. Okay, in other words, turn it by hand, and not with this wiggle like I'm doing it. You'd have the guitar laying down and you wouldn't have it going like this. Hold it with 2 fingers, with 2 hands, and just gradually turn, checking every once in a while. Don't do the full drill down. Just do a bit of a drill down, see if the machine head is still lined up well. If it is, keep going. And as it turns out, it doesn't take long at all, like probably a minute to a minute and a half to get one of these drilled 3/16 of an inch deep, which is all you need, okay? So my recommendation is, don't be using things like a Dremel. Don't be spinning things at high velocity into the wood. Don't rely on things like this. You can't see exactly where the drill bit is going in, and for this, it needs to be so precise. Plus, you can't do it in one pass. If you do it in one pass, you'll end up, as I say, with that notch not being quite in the right spot. Don't try this. I've tried this as well. Doesn't work. You know, the idea is you use it to keep your drill bit vertical, but that does not work. It's too awkward. The easiest way, literally the easiest way, is taking the drill bit in your hand. It's almost like marking in a mirror, and just working it with your fingers, holding it with the other hand just to keep it steady, but work it in until you've got that 3/16 of an inch. And the result will be, as I say, a Sperzel machine head that fits nice and squarely, okay? I'm going to do that on the rest of the holes. Okay, so here's an example. I've already put these 2 in, and they're nicely lined up. I'm going to work on this one here. Take the bit, place it in the guide hole. I've already done a couple of tests to make sure that when I put it in, it's lining up nicely with the edge of the guitar. So I'm going to make sure I get it to the full depth, which is 3/16. And because I'm doing it by hand, not just drilling it with a power drill or Dremel, I only have to go like about 1/16 of an inch at a time, or even less. There's no risk that I'm going to accidentally drill through to the front of the headstock. Again, I'm just going to test, find out if I'm laying flat yet, and as it turns out I am, so I'm done there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put together the first 3. So this is the shortest. I'll put that through. Make sure it's well seated. I'm not going to do it untightly right there. Again, these are staggered, so these ones that are on the end here are going in. They're going to be the shortest of the bunch. Washer goes on. Screws on after that. Make sure it's well seated at the back. And the second highest posts, those are those. so we're going to put this one on here. This is just to give us a sense of whether everything's lining up, but I think you can see they are. All right, so now we've got 5 of the tuning machines in. They haven't been tightened in, I just put them in by hand. I'm going to show you how this works. This is the machine pad here. This is the pin that will go into this little hole right here. Of course, this is the post that will go into that hole right there. So we'll drop the Sperzel tuning peg in like that, turn it over, there it is right there, move it so you can center it a bit here so you can see it better. And then there is a washer that needs to go in around the peg, and then there's this bit here which is a screw-in surround that goes within the washer but around the tuning peg. And so we just make sure we're squared on the tuning peg before we push it in too far, because we don't want to cross thread it. Once we've got it all the way in there by hand, then we can start tightening with a socket wrench. I'm using a number 11 socket wrench size. So we're just going to tune it, or to tighten it gently by hand. Back off a bit with the camera. You want to be tight enough that you're not, you're not allowing any gap at the back between the machine head and the back of the headstock. But at the same time, I don't think you need to be so tight that you're risking, stripping the threads. Make sure you're in there all the way before you start turning. These are very shallow hex-shaped things, so you've got to make sure that your socket set's all the way down on. I think there we are. We've got them all operational. These 5 are perfectly in line. I'm a little less happy with that one, but what I'm learning about these Sperzels is they're probably the most complex, or at least the most finicky, system, because that little pin, if it's off by 1/3 of a millimeter, it will change the angle of these tuning pieces considerably, and at 1/2 millimeter you'd probably be able to see it easily. So if you're super picky about how parallel you want those, you're gonna have to be very cautious, and as I say, probably doing it by hand, little bit by little bit, is the best way, at least with the Paduk neck, which is very soft, to make sure that you're not going to be moving too far to the left or to the right, or too far to the top or to the bottom, as the case may be. All right, so we have now the LSR roller nut. We've got the 6 Sperzel locking tuners. We'll see how those work when we get the strings on. Now it's time to move off and onto the body.